It's time to hit the road and discover Texas with Annie Studebaker. Get ready to travel deep into the heart of the Lone Star State, meeting friendly folks and exploring fascinating places. Experience a way of life like nowhere else in the world as we uncover the rich history and culture of Texas. Discover adventure, discover excitement, discover Texas with Annie Studebaker.
Today, we'll meet three wonderful women with fascinating stories. From the music of Valda Daughtery Gates to the hunting adventures of Dorothy Kinsel and the custom vests and wedding cakes of Peggy Hillje, we're in for a fun time. So sit back and enjoy the show.
I'm Valda Daughtery Gates, and I was born in Laredo, Texas, and raised in Monterrey, Mexico, and in Roma, Texas, until I was 14, and I came here because my father had a heart attack in Mexico, and the doctors told him to rest for a year, but instead of resting, he brought my mother and me back where they were from, to Catula, and that's how I got here. My father would not let me go to school in Mexico, and so my mother brought me to Laredo, Texas for my kindergarten. Only they didn't call it that. They called it primer. I think they called it primer in those days, and first grade. And then when I was going to be in the second grade, we just stayed there during the week for me to go to St. Peter's Academy there in Laredo. And then at the end of those 2 years, by that time my father's job was taking him more towards Starr County, more from Monterey to Roma, that area. So they were building a gas pipeline for the United Gas Company, and that's what, he was the superintendent of that pipeline. So then we had a company house, just a little house, just a little casita in Roma, and we lived there, so I could go to school there, and then we'd either go to Monterey or come here to visit or something on holidays, you know. And in Roma, of course, I got to skip the second grade because we had Catholic nuns were our teachers. They had a convent there where they taught the nuns were learning whatever, and they were our teachers through elementary school. And I would get in trouble every day because I could speak English, and the other children were just learning English, and so they let me skip the second grade, and so that's how I got to go. I got to graduate from high school at 16 instead of 17. During those years, I played the guitar. I took lessons. They were supposed to have been, I think, 1 hour lessons every day with a Mr. Chavez in Roma. And he was a man probably in his late 70s when I was 9 years old. And he taught me to play the guitar, and he taught me all Mexican music. He had a son who would come and a daughter who would come, and they would sing with us, with Mr. Chavez and me. And of course, the only songs we knew were in Spanish. Everything was in Spanish. So I learned a beautiful song named Jalisco, No Te Rajes, okay? And really, Jalisco No Te Rajes has been through my life. And it means to me, don't give up. Don't ever give up, whatever. So when I went to college, I came here, of course, when I was in the 10th grade. And I finished school here. And of course, I played the guitar on many programs and things because it was part of, I could entertain people with that. You know, then whenever I went to college, I took Jalisco with me to college. And pretty soon I was playing on a lot of programs. I was invited to play my guitar and sing on a lot of programs. And I always used Jalisco as one of my songs. There was a young football player there. His name was he's passed on now, Marvin Schwartz from Mercedes. And he liked to play the guitar, and he liked to sing with me. and he would harmonize with me. And his favorite song was also Jalisco. So much so that in later years, when he had a ranch, and he has a ranch in Starr County, he named it Jalisco. And Marvin and I sang together on many, many programs. We were just good friends, very, very good friends. Never anything more, but just good friends. And later years, many, many years later, I graduated from college in 1950, and it was A&I, Texas A&I then. But the A&I Alumni Association gives a Heritage Award every year to someone that they think has done something to help A&I, the heritage of A&I. And since Jalisco was chosen as the fight song many years ago, Marvin and I were given the award in 2010. Yes, 2010. And we were very proud of that. Also, there was a man, this is the way that happened. We would sing Jalisco on the programs. And then the next thing you know, one time our football team was really way behind, and they weren't doing real good. And so someone in the band stood up, and with his instrument, I think it was a cornet, he played Jalisco. And when he did, everybody got excited, even the football players got excited. And we won the game. And so from then on, he would play Jalisco at the games. And se animaba la gente, ¿me entiendes? Se animaban todos, hasta los jugadores se animaban. Then the band director wrote the music for the band. And the band played Jalisco at the games. And it became the school song. It became the fight song for the school. It still is today, the fight song for Texas A&M at Kingsville. When we received the Heritage Award, the band leader, the band director, who had written the music for this, for Jalisco, was also honored. So we felt very grateful that the three of us were able to be there. And in those days, A&I was just the right size to know everybody, to speak to them, but you didn't know all about them. You just, it was just a smaller campus, of course, and it was a very friendly campus. And of course, I majored in Spanish because Spanish is practically my native language, and I could have a good time and still make my good grades. But I ended up then teaching Spanish for 34 years. Es por eso que hablo español más que inglés. Y es por eso que gocé 34 años de enseñar el español en Laredo United, en Freer, en Bruni, donde estaba mi esposo con su ganado, porque mi esposo era ranchero. Entonces, aquí en Cotula enseñé el español, muchos años aquí. Teaching to me is a wonderful profession because of the opportunity that you have to make a difference in their lives, okay? And that to this day, I'm 84 years old, and I see my former students, I don't shake their hands. Me dan un abrazo, and I give them a hug because I love them and I love their children. And I think that we need teachers who love students, who love kids and see the good in the kids, and who see the opportunity of being an educator. That's what I see, and I love that.
Hold on to your hat. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. Dorothy Kinsel has been hunting all her life and has countless awards to show for it. She was kind enough to share her history and hunting experience with us.
My name is Dorothy Mangum Kinsel, and I grew up here in Cotulla. but about 8.5 miles down on the Nueces River. Lived out in the country. Of course, I attended school in Cotulla, rode a school bus, and enjoyed that. We had a lot to do growing up because we were in the country. Had horses to ride, and my sister and I enjoyed riding. And also we were on the river, so we always had a motorboat or just a paddle boat that we enjoyed. My friends in Cotulla liked coming out to visit us because they enjoyed doing all those out. Children then did a lot of outdoor activities. We had to, I can remember mothers almost had to call us in to make us come in for meals. Our main things that we liked to do were outdoors. Well, I continued school here, graduated from high school in Cotulla. Had a wonderful faculty, I thought. Then I went to college, which was then Texas State College for Women, and of course now it's Texas Woman's University in Denton. Finished college in 1951 and was very, very, very much in love with Dan Kinsel Jr., whom I married after he served his term in the Navy during World War II. And then after I graduated from college, and fortunately for me, he waited for me. And we were married in 1951 in September. And he was in the automobile business, General Motors. We sold Chevrolets, Buicks, and Oldsmobiles. And then later got into the ranching business, which we have continued to do. My sons are Dan the third and Carl Kinsel. Fortunately for all of us, they enjoy ranching as much as I do, so we've continued in the ranching business. When my husband was ranching with us, before we lost him, we had a place in the state of Durango in Mexico, and we did that for about 18 years, and that was a very, very happy time in my life. Then another important part of my life, I consider, I was taught school here in Cotulla after I married, and thoroughly enjoyed that. It was very rewarding. And still I run into my students that have made their home in Cotulla, and it's such fun to talk to them and keep up with how their lives have turned out. And you feel you've had a tiny part of their lives just by teaching. Well, there was something else I've always enjoyed. My father and I used to deer hunt together, and it was back when all the ranchers burned pear in the winter, especially during the drought. So he would burn pear, and it was long before we had big of the stands that we sit in now to deer hunt. So he would help me get up in a mesquite tree and then hand the rifle to me, and he would burn pear, and the deer, of course we burned pear for the cattle, but the deer also would come to the pear grounds, we called them, to eat the pear, prickly pear we're talking about. I guess my favorite hunting story, I was hunting with Carl, my son, and this is more recently when we hunted from stands. And I had, we always have binoculars. He had a pair of binoculars and I did too. I'd spotted the deer that I thought was perfect. We're not always hunting the biggest deer. We're trying to find freak deer, unusual antlers. So I saw one, and I waited and explained to Carl, and then Carl wanted me to shoot another one, and I got it in my crosshairs and was able to to shoot it in one shot. We waited, and Carl went over to make sure that it was down, and he was totally in the opposite direction. So of course I looked back to the one I'd seen first, and surprisingly he was still there, so I shot him. And Carl comes back to my stand and said, "Mom, did you shoot again?" I said, "Yes, shot the one I wanted to shoot in the first place." Back in 1960, my father, along with quite a few other ranchers or directors with the South Texas telephone company that everyone will know now as Valley Telephone. The men went down and put up the lines, put up the poles. If a pole was knocked down or a pickup ran over it or something, fixed the wires themselves. Then later, as recent as 1960, then they formed this co-op that later became Valley Telephone. I'm very fortunate that I do enjoy travel, but the greatest thing about a trip, is coming home. No matter where you go, I think you miss the sunsets of South Texas and the starry nights and the wide open spaces. So coming home is very special to me.
When we return, we're going to meet Peggy Hillje, who'll give us a look at custom vests and wedding cakes.
Hold on to your hat. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. Peggy Hillje has always been one creative lady. We sat down with her to talk about her custom vests and amazing wedding cakes.
My name is Peggy Hillje. I married Charles Fred Hillje, better known as Freddie, in 1963. We moved here to the ranch in LaSalle County in 1967, right after our son was born. We were having a hard time making ends meet. So during that time, I had a wonderful home economics teacher. So I started sewing for people. That evolved. Then one day when I was working on a wedding dress, a girl said, "I cannot find anybody to make my wedding cake. I don't want to carry it from San Antonio." So I started making wedding cakes to go along with the sewing that I was doing. She taught me how to make the Mexican gum paste flowers. My sewing evolved through the years. We did catering. Our children helped. Our nieces helped. The cakes have evolved so much from when I first started to what they're using now. In fact, the last wedding cake that I did was artificial, except for a section of the cake. The top is real, and one section of the bottom of the cake where the bride and groom cut the cake and feed each other, it's real. But then you bring your cakes from out of the kitchen and cut them, and your table stays nice and pretty, and it can be a part of your decorations that you have. It works real well, and it's a lot easier to transport when you do that. The last cake I transported, I went over to close to Corpus. Done fountains, and the vibration from the fountain has caused the cake to fall. So there's been a lot of catastrophes through the years. I always said I was going to write a book, What the Bride Doesn't Know Won't Hurt Her. But I made cakes here, sat here many long hours, because making gum paste flowers, if you're doing roses, they have to be done in stages. And the weather like we're having right now, where it's humid and damp, it doesn't set up very well. So you have to make sure that you have good dry air. Many a times I've had to put them in the oven to get them to dry. The catering got to where it was getting harder to find somebody to help because the kids were graduating and going off to school, so my workforce was getting depleted. So I began to sew more, and I came up with making vests out of old blue jeans, recycling, because at that time recycling was really, it still is, but it was really big. My primary customers when I started making them were hunters, because we had a day hunting business. Hunters always want to take something home for the wife, you know, because they've spent all this money and they want to soften it when they get home. So they would give me orders, specifically things that they wanted, that whatever their wife's interest and what colors she wore and everything. And I would custom make the vest for them to go with whatever the man decided depicted for their wife. I would have a few made up. Sometimes they would select the ones that I had made up, but most of the time they were custom orders. And the reason I chose blue jeans because there's always an overabundance of worn blue jeans. Even now, distressed jeans is really popular. Everybody, you see them on TV with the holes in their jeans, so it works well. And the way I've made the vest has been trial and error. When I first started to how I'm doing them now is a little different than when I first started. But I've taught classes in Branson, Missouri. I taught classes in Corpus Christi. I've taught classes in San Antonio on how to make the vest. The hardest part is learning how to work with the metallic threads and the do's and the don'ts, what you've got to do to get the metallic threads to work well. And I think that's what adds to the glitz of the vest is the metallic thread. I was a member of the Young Homemakers of Texas, which was an organization that was an adult organization that was parallel to Future Homemakers of America. Our organization decided that we needed a county fair because the kids were raising their animals and having to go to Laredo to sell them and to show them because there was no facilities or anything around where they could show their animals. So we began the LaSalle County Fair Association. This evolved into the LaSalle County Fair Wild Hog and Cook-Off. At the time when I went off of the board as an officer, I had been on the board probably about 30 years. I was the only original member of the organization that started the county fair. I went to all of the clubs when our Young Homemakers Club vanished. And so I went to every organization that was in Cotulla, asked them to send a representative that it needed to be a county show, not just run by one organization. So along came our centennial for Cotulla, and we needed something to be a draw for people to come for our centennial for the city. So along with my brother-in-law and some other ranchers and that, we came up with the Wild Hog Cook-Off. It was twofold. One, it would help us get rid of some of the nuisance that we have in LaSalle County, which are hogs, wild hogs. Number two, they could be shot any time of the year, so we didn't have to worry about a season. So our first show, we had 8 cook-off teams. The next year we had, I think, probably 10 cook-off teams, and the next year we had 26 teams. We now have over 200 and some odd teams that participate in the Wild Hog Cook-Off.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Interesting Ladies of South Texas. Who would have thought we could find such amazing stories in our own backyard? Until next time.